Hi, I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast. I'm so glad that you've made your way here and that I'm now sharing these podcasts here on YouTube. In my 25 years in the beauty industry, I have worked with thousands of women. I have witnessed so many beautiful, powerful, smart, and kind women who are hiding instead of shining. My mission is to empower you to own your true power and beauty inside and out, to be truly confident and shine through your skin. Lord knows the world needs your light. I'm committed to helping you understand the choices that you are making that are working for or against you. I'll also be sharing beauty tips and tools your mother never taught you, and together we will bust urban beauty myths. Make sure to subscribe today to receive episodes right when they are released. For those who prefer listening to the audio podcast, head over to sacredbeautylifestyle.com. That's sacredbeautylifestyle.com, and you can find the platform of your choice. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast. I am super excited to share with you the lovely Patricia Martin. She is a trauma and relationship specialist and the founder of Healing to Happy. This global movement is taking the world by storm as it liberates the modern woman to step into her relaxed feminine energy and allow the man to step into his leadership without the triggers of the past. It happens at quantum speed. It doesn't even really make sense until you're in it. She's here to change the way we date, communicate, and connect with the modern world. Hello and welcome. So excited to be here with you today, Patricia Martin.
Hello, darling. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, there's some juiciness here. I'm already reading your bio and my wheels are turning. And I love that you're talking about the feminine healing and allowing the woman to step into a relaxed feminine energy and without the triggers of the past, that then men can then step into their leadership. Can you speak to some of this right now?
Yeah. So anyone that is like new to any of that vocabulary, like we have every single person has masculine and feminine energetics within them. So we have, our receivership, and then we have our doing, which is our masculine. We get things done. And especially as entrepreneurs and doers and go-getters, we are very much in our hyper masculine often. And this can come from a wounded trauma space of these, like, I am only lovable or worthy if I'm doing something, if I'm high achieving, if I make X amount of money, if I'm hitting these points and doing these things, and therefore maybe then I'll be worthy of something. Whereas in the feminine, it's like, I am worthy simply because I am, just because I be, this is what I do. And so when we can get the balance of those two things within ourselves is, if we have our healthy masculine and we have our healthy feminine, we can start to play with these energetics within dating, within life, within business. And it really is this art form, and it comes from your nervous system. How relaxed can you be? Right? Because if you go into something with this needing and proving energy, think of being on a date with someone that is very needy, and you're like, ugh, like it just like closes you off. Like that is everything in the world. If you're coming into this space of like, I need this, I need it, it's like, that's a turn on. But if it's like, ooh, I just like really desire this, and it's this like kinky little chase and this like turn on, and I'm gonna come after it, it's like, ooh, I'm in, let's play. Like playing with these kind of energetics within our nervous system is how we start to create our life as opposed to respond and react to our life. And that's truly at the art. Like when we can stop living within our trauma responses and our protective layers that we built up from early age. Like our main stuff is pre 7 years old, is like what all the science says, but I don't necessarily fully believe in all of that, because then we have life experiences, we have heartbreak, we have family, we have, especially now, social media. Like I didn't grow up with social media, now it's a thing. Like it's these things where it's like life also happens post 7 years old, and you build up these coping mechanisms and these strategies and these attachments and these detachments. And to really understand that about yourself, that especially after the age of 25, once your prefrontal cortex is finally built and finalized, you get to now witness of like, who am I really without my protective layer, and how do I want to show up? And I personally work in the realm of relationships, of like, how do you want your relationships to be? How do you want to open yourself up to that so that you can actually live in the present moment with your partner versus projecting all of these like family wounds and past breakups and things like that onto this poor soul that's just trying to have a drink with you.
Right? So much of what we do is, what is it? The percentage I'm trying to think of now that we operate through the subconscious versus the conscious.
95%.
Yeah, that. It's ginormous.
Yeah. It's bananas. And a lot of us don't know that, where it's like all of our habits, all of our patterns, all of our, like everything about you. Like when you say you don't like someone's personality, what you're saying is you don't like how they learn to protect themselves through all these years. And so when you can just witness it through that lens where it's like, yes, not everyone is for everyone, and that's totally okay, but it's just kind of witnessing of like, there is no shame in that. They just learned how to protect themselves in a different way than I did. And sometimes that's a match and sometimes that's not. But either way, it's giving compassion for whatever that person has been through, because you don't really know.
I love that you brought that in about the persona that gets created, because again, it's not something that we're conscious of, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a thing too, where it's like a lot of us, not a lot of us, but oftentimes what I see before you step into this world is the victim role. Like, this happens to me and this happened. And I did that, right? Like my background is I had domestic violence, I had addictions, I had eating disorders, I had, sexual assaults, I had loss, I had suicide attempt, like all these big T trauma things. And I claimed that victim role. Like I was allowed to be an asshole to the world, and I was allowed, like, these things happen to me and therefore I get to be this type of person. And we see this a lot, right? Until you kind of understand science of your body and you understand the psychology of what's going on. It's like, actually, the life that you have is a mirror back. Not that I'm at fault for any of that. No one is ever at fault for these things happening, but we are responsible for what we do with that, right? The cards that I was dealt. So like after I lost my mom to addiction, I didn't choose to go get help. I chose to self-sabotage and go down these paths and surround myself with these people, which then resulted in other external events and kept kind of spiraling until when I was 24 and knees on the floor moment and like sitting there and I'm like, I can't do this anymore, and realizing if I want to change, I therefore need to take radical ownership over everything that's happening in my life. The good, the bad, the ugly. Like I need to take ownership over that and therefore pivot what my nervous system actually deems as safe and start to get really uncomfortable with these now, because I was addicted to chaos, being in this survival complex, and then pivoting to, okay, what is actually safe and how can I start to shift that? But this isn't a normal conversation, right? Like it was just like this intuitive hit that I got at 24 years old where I was like, this can't be what life is about. Like surviving, like this isn't going to be my freaking story for the rest of my life. I refuse to subscribe to that. And just kind of pivoting from there, which, I mean, if everyone could figure this out, it'd be extraordinary. But I think it's just like that one step at a time that we can kind of get that out there, that like you get to choose. And it's not to say like, yes, things are hard. I will never deny that. Life in and of itself is a sticky little pickle. Like that is just the gift that we have. And how you want to navigate that, though, is up to you entirely.
I would love for you to speak a little bit about victim, because there are times when we are victimized, but not staying there. So, how does someone differentiate? How can someone identify if they're a victim? I did hear you say angry, and this always happens to me. Can you share a little bit more, so for our listeners who are like, wait, am I? What does that mean? But a lot of shit happens to me.
Yeah, and that's it. It's like claiming that identity with that, where it's like a lot of shit happens to me, and it's like, or you can choose the alternative of like, I move through a lot of shit. It's literally that, where it's like you can sit there, and I'm going to speak from I because I don't want to offend anyone, but it's like for me, I sat there and I was like, well, my mom's dead, my friends are dead, like this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. Well, who's gonna save me? Who's gonna come in their little glory and save me? And I thought that was it for life. And then it was really, okay, these things happen. What am I doing now? What's my choice with this? How do I want to use this? Because my firm belief is nothing happens by accident. So this stuff happens to me. Now what? What's the story that I'm telling in hindsight? Whether it's for me, I wasn't an entrepreneur yet. It was literally in my head being like, if my daughter ever went through this, what is the story I want to tell her? And I just held that belief until my business accidentally started. Like I always make the joke, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Like that wasn't the plan. It's just everyone saw how much of a hot mess I was, and then they saw me turn my life around, and they're like, "Can I pay you? Like, how did you do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." But yeah, that victimhood is literally just that switch. Like it's just the switch of like, this is happening to me, to what do I want to do with this? If this is going to happen, what do I want to do with this? Because things are going to happen in your life. Your heart's going to break. You're going to have conflict. There's illness. There's the unexpected. There's cultural things. There's life. Like, do you want to claim that as it and be angry about it? And like, you're allowed to have your human temper tantrum moments that live within all of us, and then do you stay there, and then, or do you move into this next chapter of like, yeah, that happened and look how far I fucking came. Like that's the story that I choose to sell and tell.
I love the way you just broke that down. Thank you. I think that's really helpful because it's about not staying there, but also not being in denial of what happened. Because if we don't let ourselves grieve and move through the emotions that we see happening a lot today, I feel like we're not letting ourselves feel and be what is actually really happening, and then restoring that, right? And that can haunt us.
That's trauma, right? Like the thing, I was just on an interview before this as well, where it's like, for me in my practices and in my program, Sacred Singlehood, like I have an entire thing around like sacred rage and emotional honesty, because a lot, especially women, we're not supposed to be angry. Like we are supposed to be good girls, quiet, people pleasing, self-abandoning. That's how we stay in line. That's how we get accepted. The truth is, and the way that one of my mentors explained it was like, we're volcanoes. Like we have a fire inside of us, but we choose how we want to use that in the world. But often what we're doing is we're dressing up that volcano as a mountain and then building these communities around it. And therefore it looks pretty and it's not allowed to erupt, because now it's going to spill onto the community around us. And therefore now we're stuck into this nice girl, people pleasing thing. When really the art of the feminine is like, you have a fire inside of you and it's the sexiest thing about you, and you choose not to use it. You just have it and you use it as a creative outlet, or you use it for something that you're passionate about. And like, that's that part of us where it's like, there's these emotions that we have to fully feel, like the shame and the regret and the doubt and the disappointment and, the bitterness and all these kind of feelings that we navigate on a day-to-day basis. And if we deny them, they just build up, and that can show in, trauma responses and triggers and relationship issues and business issues and money wounds and things like that. And it can show up as physical ailments like IBS, which is what my first business was, and all the gut issues and the skin issues and all this kind of stuff that, that was my first business. It was understanding the whole gut-brain connection and the metabolism and how this is all affected by our stored trauma. And, if we don't release these emotions, and it's getting really comfortable with the fact that like, you're a multifaceted human being. How comfortable can you be with the fact that you have rage, you have sadness, you have regret, you have guilt, you have shame? And can you comfortably just sit in that without identifying it as good or bad? Like, it is simply just an emotion. It's just the human experience and the human narrative that gave these emotions a negative connotation. It's not actually negative unless you're doing something bad, like quote unquote bad, and like beating someone up. But it's like, if you just sit with that emotion, there's nothing actually bad about it. It's just a heavier feeling than delight. But like, you can't actually tap into pure delight, which is like the feminine essence, without also being able to hold the potentiality of the darkness that may come.
You are speaking my language, sister. I love this so much. I often say that the more darkness that you can navigate and hold, that's equivalent, or the level of darkness you can navigate and hold is equivalent to the amount of light that you can hold.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Oh, this is so good. Sacred anger. I think women have been, people in general, and particularly women, have not been allowed to feel and express and even identify. Let's just be real. We don't even know how to identify what anger is because it's that suppressed, right?
Exactly.
How can you suggest that that somebody even notice? Like maybe one of our listeners here are like, well, I don't know that I'm angry. Am I angry?
Yeah, you can start to look at these things where situation, someone cuts you off in traffic, someone says something, you read something, like how quick you are to probably switch your brain around, like that doesn't matter, disassociation, I don't even know what that is, and like you just kind of pivot. Where it's like, for me, it started, I definitely knew what anger was. Like that was my natural tendency, so I was very well acquainted with it. It was very much pulling that volcano back in. But for anyone that's like, I don't know, it's like, can you just scream? the thing about screaming that I love, and I like to do it in my car, like no one can hear you in your car, it's totally fine. Like while you're stopped at a stoplight, no one can hear you. We're only allowed to scream if someone dies or when we're giving childbirth. Those are the two only appropriate times that we're allowed to actually sacred scream and like let it rip. And it feels so fucking good. Like it is so good. Like, and just letting that happen. And if that feels like a stretch, that's your coping, that's your protection mechanisms, because all you're doing is screaming. Like it doesn't need to be anything. It's just like the emotional release where you're just like in your car at a stoplight and you're just like, and you just kind of let it go and you feel that. And it's like, oh, that's what that is. And you start to play with it. And it's not good. It's not bad. It's just a release. And you start to experience that and you can start to kind of feel in your body, oh, like, where do I feel that? Because this is the way that I work, is like I look at the symptom and I work my way backwards with clients. It's like, okay, so a symptom of rage is anger or hitting a pillow or whatever it is. And so that's the symptom. And then once we kind of get acquainted with that symptom, if we haven't actually had that activation yet, it's then we work back to the body of like, okay, when I'm screaming, where do I feel that in my body? Oh, I've never even noticed that tension before or that heat or that thing. I just thought that was normal, like a part that I would just kind of think, but it goes away after you release. So it's like, okay, now I'm getting acquainted with this feeling. What's actually causing that? And then we can start to kind of compartmentalize all the puzzle pieces of our life so we can stop living out of these trauma responses and protective layers and actually get into the body and create the life that we're trying to create.
Oh my goddess. I'm still reeling from sacred screaming. Like, that is amazing. I'm like, is that the title of the podcast? I don't know.
It should
But
be. It's so fun.
it is. And it's often advised that, you know, from therapists or breathwork coaches, there's like this cathartic practice in the healing arts we talk about where to scream or hit the pillow, like you were saying, and maybe go outside and scream on a mountaintop. I gotta be honest, I don't feel comfortable screaming outside.
Yeah.
Why did nobody ever tell me to scream in my car, right? Except for you right now.
Really? I know. I'm like outside, someone's going to think I'm getting attacked. Like I'm not available for that. But in your car, like I'll turn on some like, I'm like one of those emo kids back in the day in the 90s. And I'll turn on like early 2000s, late 90s kind of music. And I'll like get me pumped and I'll like let it rip in the car. And then I go to like a Pilates class because I truly don't believe you can start doing all this manifestation and feel good and all the kind of things that we see in this freaking toxic positivity world if you don't get the bad out. Like you can't actually call in. This is why manifestations don't come true and the things we keep trying to call in, because you actually haven't gotten the things that are trapped within you out. And as soon as you get acquainted with them, it's not like you sit in this for like days on end. It's literally just like meeting it. And it's like, oh, you exist. Watch how quickly things come into practice. And like you're able to actually tap into this next level of enlightenment and this next level of like happiness and joy and relaxation and femininity and warmth and love that we're so suppressed from, because now you're like, oh, like this part of me does exist. It's neither good nor bad. It's just like kind of there. And we start to get to shift that pattern within us. It's incredible.
Oh, I love the way you broke that down, because I do know, and many of our listeners probably are familiar with the law of attraction. We hear it everywhere. And then we often hear people saying it doesn't work. And what I know about the it not working is also there's two sides of the stick. We often light up what we don't want because we're really passionate about it. But it's also the underneath subconscious, the unconscious emotions or thoughts or feelings we were talking about earlier that we're operating from 95% of the time, right? So if you don't meet that, you are actually going to be calling in what you don't want, or not, certainly not going to be able to call in what you do want, right?
Exactly. And again, it's working your way backwards where you can look at your life. And this is the thing that a lot of us don't want to do. We don't want to look at where we might be at fault for things. And so like I think a practice I always look at and I talk my clients through is like, what went right, what went wrong, what do we do differently? Because as humans, what we normally do is we only look at what went right, and therefore we're like living in la la land, and then like nothing ever goes wrong and we're perfect and it's everyone else's fault and here we go. Or we're only looking at what went wrong and we're stuck in victimhood, and we're only looking at these things and we blame ourselves and we're self-deprecating. And then we never even get to the third step because we haven't looked at the other two, like, or the other one. So how I like to start it is like, well, what is currently going right? Like in your life, say around relationships, since that's what I specialize in. It's like, what's going right in your relationships? Why are they going right? What's going? Can you like celebrate the fact that like your friendships are great, or your business or your community? Great. Fantastic. What went wrong? I am dating the most narcissistic, like these men, they hate committing, they're avoidant, da da da. And it's like, okay, what do we want to do differently? It's like, let's take responsibility over this not computing. And the fact is, like, do you have intimacy blockages? Like, what are you actually afraid of? Because the reason you're calling in these types of situations in your life is because somewhere in your nervous system, it deems that as safe. Like, the only reason things happen in our life is because that is where our nervous system is like, this is actually my comfort zone. And a lot of people don't want to swallow that pill because it's like, well, that means I'm wrong and I'm doomed forever. It's like, no. It's just witnessing. Like for me, for example, I every partner up until the one that I currently have has cheated on me. So the last breakup I had, I was like, okay, I can get mad. And of course I did, because human experience. But I can also look at, like, I am the common denominator in every one of these relationships. What's actually going on here? Like, let me take an actual CEO strategic view of my relationships right now. And it was like, okay. And so diving into these things, it's like, oh, I'm actually terrified of intimacy, like deep intimacy, of someone seeing me because I believe myself to be too broken. So let me actually heal that wound that I believe about myself. And actually, what is deeper than that? I believe myself to be unlovable and unworthy. Ooh, okay, cool. How can I start to build that trust with self? How can I build that confidence? How can I start to build this part of myself up so I can then call in the love that I really consciously want, but subconsciously haven't gotten to yet? And now I honestly have the most extraordinary love of my entire life of doing that kind of work, because it's just taking ownership over it instead of thinking, oh, men are bad, life is evil, the economy sucks. It's like, who gave away the keys to your car and started driving your vehicle for you? Like, you get to drive the car, you get to course correct, you get to create the path. Like, it's just taking ownership over every single thing.
It sounds to me like what you were just explaining is the shadow work that we often hear. It's time to do the shadow work, or, to delve into the subconscious. That's really what it is, right? Those blockers, like to see like what is eclipsed from your vision.
Yeah,
Is that what you're,
exactly.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's the thing. To me, shadow work, I think it even gives it a negative connotation, because it doesn't have to be horrible. And especially as CEOs and like entrepreneurs, you're like, if I dive into this work, is it going to take away my like focus on my business? Am I going to be always worried about this stuff? It's like, no, like not at all. It's literally can be like a 10-minute practice. This is what it is. You just kind of recognize your patterns, you witness it, and then you get to like witness it coming up, and you're like, oh crap, that's my trigger. Cool. I'm going to choose a different path right now. And it's just the repetition of it. Like, it's not just a one-off thing. You're aware of it. It's like, it'll come again and again and again. And then all of a sudden it's gone. Like, it's getting acquainted with this part of yourself. Like, you're not perfect. Like, we live in a world where we think we have to be perfect, and it's just unrealistic. And yet we're all striving for it. And like the human experience, where it's like, can I just guarantee that I'm giving my best? And sometimes my best is my shadow, unfortunately. And then my best has to be catering to that shadow of like the child that thinks she's unlovable, and the unworthiness, and that rebellious teenager, and all these kind of things that play into our character. Can I just witness that so I can start to shift it?
This is so freaking good, woman. Perfectly imperfect. I remember learning that, I think, from the artist Sark. Do you know who she is? I probably have some years on you. Do you know who Sark is? She wrote a book called Succulent Wild Women, and I'm 50. I'll be 51 this year. So this was like, I was like 25 when I read that. And she spoke to that. That was my first introduction of, of some of this attitude adjustment on paper. This is really, really, really powerful work then, and nuggets and tips that you're sharing. I want to repeat the question sequence. So for those of you listening who want to delve in a little bit more to these beautiful gifts that she is sharing here, you might want to grab a pen and paper and write these questions down. What went right? What went wrong? And what do we want to do different? I had to repeat those because I think that they are so powerful and important. And that is just such a great tool and tip to be able to write and reflect. Journaling is so powerful. The inquisition to self, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the world goes too fast and we think we don't have time for it. But if you sit down and pause for just a second, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where you stop reacting and responding to your life and you actually start creating it. Like, if we can have more people that are doing that, I swear to God, the world would change. Like, I'm going to create my life because I'm taking responsibility for it. Fantastic. What do I want to do now? I truly believe the world would change in that way.
Yeah, what now? I think that is another great question is what do I want to do now? Because I, like you, have been through the ringer, which I think a lot of great leaders do go through
Mhm.
the trenches so that we can lift more people up. Like the further we go in, like we were talking about, the more light we can hold, the more sisters and brothers we can help lift up with us along the way. And that has been a guiding light for me too, is, not staying in there. It's like, okay, what now? Like I really do think everything is an opportunity, but you do have to sit with the uncomfortableness, the discomfort rather, for a little bit to move it out. And I think that people are often so afraid that they're going to get stuck. We're going to get stuck in our emotions, and we've been so trained away from feeling that then there becomes this bigger resistance, and it's like the fear of actually feeling it is much greater than feeling it.
Mhm. Exactly. And it's so funny. Like, I can sit with the feelings of guilt and shame, and it'll come up in different capacities at different lights. Like the phrase goes, like, at every new level, there's a new devil. And it just happens. But, like, I can sit with it. Like, even before this call, I had a call prior to this, and it was heavy. It was a heavy call, and I could feel it in my entire body. So I just, like, moved it in the middle of my lunch. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, and now we're back. Like, this isn't mine. I'm not keeping it, and here's how I'm going to transmute that energy. And that's the somatics behind it, because it's what do we want to do? Like, how do we want to shift these things? And then, yeah, just going back to the what now. And I think a big thing about this is we think it'll like stay. Like, if I feel this and I look at it, it'll stay. And there's three forms of regulation. We have self-regulation, which is you do it yourself. We have co-regulation. We do it with another, which is how we learned self-regulation. We learned co-regulation from our caretakers. If we had that consistently, inconsistently, that builds our whole thing. But the thing that's not spoke about is auto-regulation. And this is the thing we see the world doing, which is like, it's okay to disassociate sometimes. Like, it's okay if this is like, I don't watch TV. I wasn't raised on technology. So it's not a commonality for me to even focus on TV for that long. But when I'm activated, I've had a heavy day of clients, and I'm like, I need to just like watch Emily in Paris for like 5 minutes. Like, I need to get lost. That's auto regulation. But a lot of us get stuck in that, where we're just doing that. Like, I know I'm just watching this for a second, and then I know I have to come back and regulate my body. Like, I have to eventually get to self-regulation. That's the code, right? Sometimes I do have to borrow my friends and my partners and my healers and my therapist, and I co-regulate with them because I do have a team. I don't do this by myself. But then I do have to then get to a space where it's like, I got me because I have an interview, and the call I had before this, it was heavy, and I have to be myself. So I have to go self-regulate and then come here. And so where it's playing between all three of these and knowing like, okay, it's okay to disengage sometimes. That could be the now what. Sometimes it could be okay, I need to go feel this in my body and I need to go self-regulate. That could be the now what. And then it could be co-regulation. I need to go see my girlfriends. I need to feel this fun, or I need to call my therapist. It could be fun, like whichever way that is for you. But knowing either way, we always have to get back to the self-regulated form, because we have to get that trauma response out of our body, and moving through that. Like, that's the science. It's not even woo. Like, that's just the way that we actually get this trigger and this pattern out of our nervous system, is to heal it. It's not something we can just, put affirmations and sticky notes around our house. Like, unfortunately, that can't be the now what. Like, that's not how trauma is healed. It's not a cognitive thing. It's a body thing, trauma. And it's not even, you know, a lot of us get wrapped up of like, well, I haven't had a big T trauma event. I haven't been raped. I haven't been hit. I haven't had these things. It's like, I've had people where it's like they've had food poisoning. They didn't get chosen for a certain team when they were younger, and therefore now they have these belonging wounds, and they have these childhood sisterhood wounds, or these familiar, like, they can be these things that you don't think are big, but like your body stored that. Like, trauma isn't what happened, it's what happened to your body in the moment of an event that was occurring. Like, that's what trauma is. And so if you can get your body to release these things, that's eventually the now what that we need to get to. But there's so many different ways of getting there that we can play with until we eventually land.
Thank you for explaining that about trauma, because I think that many people do not realize that these little, seemingly small incidences can make such a great impact and really stay with us and block us. I've done a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trauma healing work, so I understand what you're sharing, and have, read a bunch of different books. And I think it's really, really important work that you're sharing here. And the self regulation, the co regulation, can get us there. But I think we get stuck in the auto regulation. Yeah. Like scrolling on social media or vegging out to Netflix or, right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think that gets a bad rap because it's like, no, I have to sit in this and obsess about it. And it's like, mate, no, you don't. Like, I know I was a freaking self-help junkie for a long time. Like, you get to have, like, again, it gets to be pleasurable. It's just always coming back to, we have to transmute it eventually. And that comes back into the radical ownership over, like, if this is a pattern you truly want to dismiss in your life and shift in this life, it, you have to sit in the discomfort. Sorry, there's no bypassing that. Like, but there is a safe container you can do it in, and it doesn't have to be an all day event and these like screaming at the moon at these retreats and running around naked kind of things. It could literally be 5 minutes of you feeling what shame feels like in your body, and like witnessing that, and just holding it, and then releasing it, and holding it, and releasing it, and moving back and forth. That you get to see this pendulum effect. That's what it's called in somatics. It's when you hold the bad, and then you can shift to a good, and hold the bad and shift to a good. And that's the control of the mind and the body, and getting them on the same vibration and the same wavelength.
Thank you for explaining that. I love that. Such beautiful work you're doing. I feel like we could seriously talk for hours. Like there's so much I want to ask of, and I will say that the word transmute came up for me earlier when you were talking about the volcano. That is the feminine and that power. And that's what I was thinking. That's the feminine's job, right? Also is to transmute. And then I thought about this book recently, The Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've thought about reading that for years. I mean, have you seen the book? It's like ginormous, right? And it's really dense. So, but someone had said to me recently, and I'll just share this because I think this is all of our job, not just mine. But she said to me, Lisa, you're like a walking Course in Miracles. You're able to transmute whatever comes to you to love. Like that's your job. And I believe that's all of our jobs, is to transmute it back to its source, which is the only thing that is real, is love.
I love that. I love that so much.
It's the work you do. It's what you do. You help people transmute their pain, their trauma, their past, which we all go through. And we don't need to, judge the level of trauma that we had. It's trauma. It just is. And if we can accept that, and be willing to feel a little bit of intensity for a minute, it can, the shifts, you're living proof of the shifts that can transpire when you had been in so many repetitive cycles of abuse and addiction or what have you that you shared with, past relationships. And here you are.
Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. I think we all get to be the alchemists of our lives. Something my mentor says is, you get to alchemize your pain and your shame, and you get to turn it into gold. And that's your art in this world, whether it is, creating a business or doing whatever. But like, it could be for your family. Like for me, like I said before, I even got into this world, it was because my future daughter. I was like, I can witness that this is a generational pattern. And so if she were to go through this, how do I want to talk to her about it in a real, honest way? Because I didn't get that until after the fact. And I really wish my family would have sat down with me and said, hey, me too. And this is what happened. And let's have a conversation about this before it happens. And, life. But I think oftentimes we're trying to protect people in that way. But yeah, it's just alchemizing it. It's just like, I love the way that you said that, where it was like, trauma is neither good or bad. It's just a thing that happened. Like, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you're too broken. It doesn't mean anything about you. It's just a chapter in your story. And it's like, okay, so then what's the rest of the book? What are we writing in the rest of that book? Of what that, maybe that's just like even the prelude. Like, what is the rest of the book get to be about you?
And I want to even expand on this a tiny bit more and say that that's where your superpower lives. Like I was starting to say earlier, right, about how so many of us leaders go through the ringer. I mean, we look at Maya Angelou and, having been raped and didn't speak for years, etc. And look at the beauty and the impact that she made in the world because of what she'd been through, not in spite of it. We don't go through hell for nothing. These are opportunities to transform, transmute, to rise, evolve, grow, and help others do that as well.
Beautiful.
And relationships. I love that you're working in relationships because we get wounded in relationships and we also heal in relationship.
Exactly. It's the place where, especially now, what I'm seeing at a high level is one, we distract ourselves with work and really we're just avoiding intimacy. And I'm seeing one too many very successful people, specifically women, needing to burn their businesses down because they've built businesses and then tried to squeeze in relationships around it as opposed to building a life and then building their business around that. And we're forgetting it because the ego gets in the way and we get in these survival complexes and these trauma bonds with business. And that was my first business. And it also the avoidance of intimacy, like this protects us. So it's like, I don't, because that's relationship, that's attachment. As soon as you get an attachment to someone and like attachment is healthy. We need to understand that in the world. Like we live in a way too hyper independent world right now. Like connection and vulnerability and attachment is a very healthy thing to do. But the reason we are so anti it right now is because we're also anti looking at our shadow. Because as soon as you meet someone that is in love with you and you are in like so many shadows come up. It's so the healthiest relationships are some of the most triggering, especially for people that have been through trauma. And if you don't have the regulation tools and these kind of things, we avoid them, we self-destruct, we do these things, but really at the core of it, like what society calls self-sabotage, science calls self-protection. And when we can kind of understand these things about ourselves, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm not broken. This is just a coping mechanism. This is just an attachment strategy. Got it. Cool. So how do I actually want to create a new form of safety in my body so I can actually hold all of these next level things that I want to call in business and relationship and life and friendship? Like we get to have it all. We really truly do. And I think I know because I sit at so many of the tables with high achieving women that like we forget that. We forget the reason why we started businesses was to have the freedom in our relationships and to have this love and to have like I make the joke that I did business backwards. I did health, then relationships, and then I started to focus on business. Whereas like everyone's like, okay, business, let me get this strategy and this program and how do I get to my first 10K month and what are my funnels and like all these things. And I was like, love, like lost in this bubble of things. And I was like, oh yeah, business, got it. Ew, I hate spreadsheets. Like I just like did it the wrong way. But honestly, now I'm happy I did that because now I'm at these tables with women and I was like, wait, aren't you tired? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, like we need people. Like literally we are community driven human beings. That's especially women. That's our primal brain. We're meant to, that's how we function. That's how we survive. Like for eons, that's how we've survived. And so getting back to that, I think is just, again, how we change how things are going right now. It's the most connected we've ever been and the loneliest we've ever been and the highest suicide rates and all the chronic illness and all these things that are happening. And it's like, it's people. Like it really is people and how you connect with them. And, you know, none of us are truly alone. It's just we're protecting ourselves. And how can we be a little bit more vulnerable with ourselves so we can be a little bit more vulnerable with the people we want to call into our life?
I love that. People are what matter. I always say that like people are the most important thing in the world. And it seems like we've gotten so far removed from that.
Yes. Yes.
So thanks for bringing that back. I wonder if you could share something because it seems like you work with a lot of women entrepreneurs. Is that true?
Yeah.
We have a lot of women entrepreneur listeners here, and I've been a female entrepreneur for 25 years. So I wonder if you could speak to the creating from the trauma, if there's something, for those of you listening who, might be sort of relating to what we're talking about here, what if they find themselves in a position where, yeah, I don't have relationships. My business is my entire life. You're right. I wanted freedom. I totally screwed myself out of that. I've seen it over and over, done that. So what would you say, how to start to find your way out of that?
Yeah. One is that sacred pot. So, like, the program I have is Sacred Singlehood, which is entirely created around this. It's not about being single, it's about your sovereign self. It's about understanding yourself, especially from a high achieving woman, because the conversation is just different. Like, when I say connect to your yoni and connect to your womb, like, I don't even identify with that. And that's something I see a lot in like the feminine energetics world. And I'm like, still a stretch. Like, I need to understand science. I need to understand what's happening in my brain. I need to know all these kind of things so that I can actually get behind doing this kind of work. And so that's the take that I have in looking at these things. It's like, as an entrepreneur, your job is to be creative and to see things differently, to work your way. You look at the end game, you see different outlets, you create new things. And like nowadays we live in a world that you have to be rare and valuable to go anywhere. Like that's just the way it is. Like it's not just a good idea, you also have to be rare and valuable. And so the only way that can happen is if your prefrontal cortex is online, which is the thing that keeps you regulated, connected in your ventral state, like all these kind of things. But that can't be on if you're in survival mode. And a lot of women specifically have built businesses out of trauma. They wanted to prove themselves in this industry that they are not that person anymore. I did that my first business. I honestly have never spoken to a woman that was like, I was just so in love with my life and I started this business. And like, I honestly, please reach out to me if that is you, because I would love to know you and how you built your hustle, because we all, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well, built our hustle out of survival complexes. I'm not this version of me anymore. I'm going to prove this ex wrong. I'm going to prove my parents wrong. I'm going to do this. I'm going to survive. And then we never stop surviving. And then we're stuck in this state of our amygdala, which is basically our barking guard dog. And if our amygdala is activated, we are not in our prefrontal cortex. Like it doesn't work. And yes, you've gotten yourself this far, but my guess is there's a plateau and the highs aren't hitting as high. And the numbers don't actually heal that wound of loneliness that creeps in at night or in the morning time when you're alone and you feel like you have to fill every void in your life. And it's not that you think space is lazy. It's you're actually scared of the space, because what comes up? Those self-deprecating thoughts, those wounds that you realize, I am alone, all these things we're trying to actively avoid, that if you just took a pause and you looked at this and went, okay, if I actually want to create the life because I'm the creator of my life and I've witnessed that, and it's not about, and I see it too much where it's like, well, then I have to fire my staff and I have to stop selling things and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, you can if you want, but that seems dramatic. Like you can just expand the vision. Like you just add these things in, you add boundaries. That's it. Like, where are your boundaries in place for your business? Because your business is just meant to be your business. Like, you're the CEO. How do you want it to look? Can you make these boundaries where it's like, for me, I've always taken Fridays off, but when I went through my breakup earlier last year, I took Mondays as well, because I was like, I can take my phone anywhere and I do everything through Boxer. I need an entire 5-day weekend because I need to go play. I need to fall back in love with my life. I need to remember what actually brings me joy. And that isn't found in my laptop. Yes, my business reminds me of who the heck I am and how strong I am. And it held me when my knees were on the floor and I thought, I couldn't do anything. And I would go live and I'd run a program and I'm like, damn it, you're such a boss. Like all these kind of things. But like there was also the human that needed to go fall in love with life outside of business and these external validation points. And so it's looking at these things. Where can you start to put these boundaries into place and play? Like a thing that really changed my life, I was traveling Spain one time and I was on a date and this guy was like, what do you like? And I was like, oh, like working out and my work and like self-development. And he's like, all of that has to do with business. Like, what do you actually like? And it was like one of these moments that I bet you he doesn't even remember who the heck I am. I have no idea what his actual name is, but that moment in my life changed forever, because I was like, I don't know what I like. Like, I don't have a hobby that has nothing to do with my business. Wow. What kind of like I have nothing. I can't tell you anything. And now it's like arts and crafts and reading and da-da-da and travel and all these kind of things. And I've all these different cultures and different experiences where like my boyfriend's like every morning, he's like, I honestly have no idea who I'm waking up next to. Like predictable is no way I would ever describe you. And I was like, thank you very much. Like that is who I claim to be in this world. Thank you. Like we get to own that about ourselves instead of being this rinse and repeat thing and saying like, I'm run out of time and I'm doing these things. Like you're the freaking CEO. You built that. Build better strategies, hire more team, put better boundaries in place, take radical ownership over that, do the trauma work so you can come at this at a regulated space. Yes, it might feel like it's going backwards a little bit, but I'm going to freaking bet when you do the feminine work and you do the trauma work, the skyrocket that'll happen. Like I bet my bottom dollar on that is how that, because that is how that works. You can only hold so much in a trauma space. Like I'm not saying that you don't survive, but then you get to move from this space of surviving to freaking thriving. Like it's mind blowing. Like it doesn't even fit on your vision board because your brain can't even compartmentalize that things are even possible for you at that capacity yet. Like clearly I'm passionate about this stuff.
It's so good. Everything you just shared is so right on point and so incredibly valuable. I'm speechless. I can't even talk. I forgot words. I'm really taking in everything you shared. That was awesome. And yeah, it's like do the real work, do the trauma work, and you get to create the life you want, the relationships that you want, period, right? This is your life.
Exactly.
Your
Exactly. And
one
that's
wild and precious life.
literally, and like the thing that makes my heart break is a lot of times it's like, oh, I'll do this work when I hit this amount, when I have this consistency, when I do this kind of thing, da 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 da. And it's like, what if your story was different on the way to becoming what you want to become? Like, who says you have to wait on happiness because you're only worthy if you're hitting, 30K months? Like, who wrote that script for you? Like, you can still take a pause and enjoy the process of getting there. Like, you don't have to burn yourself out on the process. You can still have the relationships, go on dates, have banging orgasms, do the thing while also building your business. Like, you get to do that. And I think we forget that, where it's like, I am only worthy if I have this much in my bank account and I do this and my body looks this way, then I can start doing these things. And it's like, do you truly believe that? Like, life, something I learned, my mom passed unexpectedly, something like, it can happen in a blink. It can happen in a blink. What if your whole life you're chasing something and you forgot to make memories because you're building this thing? Like, is that the story? Is that really your end chapter? That you were always hungry for something else and you had this hungry ghost inside of you and it was never satisfied and that was it?
That's just it. I love that you called it a hungry ghost, because I was feeling that before you said it, because it's an unattainable goal.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it's looking at like, yeah, of course, like, heck, I call it my bougie savage for a reason. She's a boss ass CEO. She wants fancy things. She wants to travel the world and she wants the most luxurious life of her life. Like, we own it. And I know that I want to make that so memorable. Like, again, if my daughter wants to go on, I don't have a daughter, but when I eventually have one, goes on this trip, it's like, who do you get to be in the journey of becoming? Like, what is that? And how do you want to write that story again and again and again and revisiting that as often as you can?
It's so beautiful. Thank you for that. It really is about the journey, right? We hear it. We hear it, but do we really take that in? Like, I think that was really impactful, the way that you broke that down.
Mm.
And you may have already answered it. You've probably already said this, what you would say to your 20-year-old self in a way in this episode. However, I wonder if you have any thoughts that you would like to share, that you would go back and whisper in the ear of the younger you that you wish she knew.
Honestly, I would just tell her to keep going. Like, she was so hungry for life, just in all the wrong ways. But I honestly don't think I would be the version of me if she knew. If I told her, you'd be okay and you're going to have this amount of money in this place and this kind of love, I think she'd be like, perfect, why freaking try? Like, honestly. And I think all of the surviving I had to go, I mean, I know I wouldn't have the stories I have and the business I have and be the person I am if she didn't live that. So I would just give her a hug and I'd be like, you're going to be okay. It's going to be really hard and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I love it. You're doing great.
Yeah, you're doing great. It's going to get real hard, real messy. Definitely just prepare. That's it.
And stay
You
all
got
in.
your, yeah, 2 feet in all the time, but like, I wouldn't change anything at all. And like, for me, I feel like that's bananas to even say, because it's like, girl, you had some things, like, but it's like, reality is I don't know, because there's always multiple pathways and many different parts of the universe happening, but like, I don't feel like I would be this version of myself that is like, damn kid, we made it. Like, I wouldn't have a story to tell if she didn't do that.
100%. You wouldn't have all these nuggets that you get to share with everyone
Yeah.
now. What is your big message that you would like to scream from a mountaintop for the whole world to know?
That we truly do get to have it all.
Oh,
Like, we really do.
yes.
That's
That's one of my favorite answers. I say that. Like, you can have it all. Did you used to watch Sex in the City?
Yeah.
Ever? So there was
Yeah.
an episode where I think Samantha had just got the place in the meatpacking district, and then they were drinking champagne, and she yells out the window, "You can have it all."
But it's true. Me and my boyfriend say that. Like, we'll like wake up and if like, because he has 3 companies, I have my company and my projects and all that kind of thing. And it's like, sometimes things get imbalanced and whatever, but it's like, we'll like sit there and it's like a busy day and we're like, we get to have it all. And like, it's just, you do. And you just kind of have to believe that. Like, yes, it's going to be busy. Yeah, sometimes you're like not going to be able to like be curled up on the couch and like doing nothing all day and all this kind of stuff. But it's like, can you make it a vibe? Like, can you enjoy yourself while you do it and like make it so it feels like it's yours? And I don't know. We really do. We
I
really
love
do.
it. You can have it all. All right, beautiful Laura Patricia Martin. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, on Instagram is where I am most active, and so my personal Instagram is it's Laura Patricia Martin, so ITS Laura Patricia Martin, and you'll probably get a message from me and my team, and we'll hang out. And from there, you can see all the ways to plug into our world, which are all extraordinary.
Fantastic. And her information will be in the show notes for you, beautiful listeners. Thank you so much for sharing so many nuggets of wisdom and guidance and just love and the life that you radiate such joy. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy.
I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast, which is now being shared here on YouTube. I hope this episode brought you insights and inspiration to radiate and shine with confidence. Remember to subscribe so you receive new episodes hot off the press right when they are released. And follow me on Instagram for more juicy tips at I am Lisa Eddy. Also, ladies and gentlemen, when you subscribe, like, and share these episodes, it helps me to get seen by more people. And that means a lot to me because I am committed to reaching millions of women across the globe and waking them up to the sacred beauty lifestyle, owning their true power and beauty, both inside and out. Now more than ever, we need more women shining instead of hiding. When we band together, we are unstoppable. This is how we change the world, together. Remember the sacred beauty lifestyle and get on out there and shine. The world needs your light.